Okay.
Hello and welcome to the King's Forum podcast show. I have a special guest on the show, Becca. How you doing, Becca?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. Listen, nice to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Always welcome. Today we're going to talk about toxic relationships that Becca's experienced and have a little discussion on that, and and kind of where she's at today from that experience and kind of the learning she's taken from some traumatic periods in your life. So Becca, what was the first toxic relationship you experienced?
So my first toxic relationship was when I was 16. So what you guys are going to hear throughout, by the way, is that I was very young when these happened. My time frame was 16 to 19 years old. So I was quite young when this happened, and I didn't really understand what constituted a healthy relationship. But my first relationship, I was in my last year of my GCSEs at school, and I'd suffered some losses in my life. So my mental health, my anxiety was already quite bad.
Yeah.
And this person found me, and to me, they just seemed incredible at the time. Obviously, it didn't end that way. But it basically transpired into in a long story short, I suffered physical abuse from them at 16. It wasn't a long relationship. After it happened once, I came home, my family kind of picked up on what was going on without me actually telling them.
Yeah.
And they stopped me seeing this person again. So that was the end of that, really. There was some backlash afterwards from them and their friends, but I was very much blaming myself, I think. I didn't really understand, why did I deserve this? Why is it other people, my friends at school, they're in great healthy relationships, and then this is happening to me? What have I done to make him do that? So that was my first experience of a proper relationship.
I was gonna say, like, mentally and emotionally, how did that make you feel after the physical abuse? Because as you said, this was your first relationship, so you were thinking, he was the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
And then this happens. So what's, when it ended and everything, how were you after that? Because obviously you went into another relationship, so mentally and emotionally.
So mentally, I felt very down. I didn't have very much self-worth. I was very much made to think that I was lucky that they even looked at me. So I felt like, oh gosh, am I ever gonna find anyone again? I was obviously very lucky to have this person, which I wasn't, by the way, guys. And I felt dirty. I felt used. I just felt like the gum on their shoe, to be honest. Like, I couldn't have felt much lower at that point. And they very much shifted the blame all on me after what happened. So even though to begin with, I was like, no, this is their fault, they very much convinced me that actually it was my fault that this happened, and that if I'd have done what they wanted in the first place, it wouldn't have happened. So
Wow.
I was emotionally feeling very confused. Obviously, I was young, I was 16. So emotionally, I was feeling very confused. I was feeling lost. And I lashed out. I got angry at people as a result. I wanted to be the scariest person in the room so that wouldn't happen to me again.
You're kind of protecting yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I had a massive defense mechanism. And I was actually, shortly after this, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Wow. Was you put on medication for that?
No, so they offered me medication. I've never been very good at taking tablets, and I also really wanted to try and beat it mentally myself. I know people that have mental health and they're on medication, it works for them, that's incredible. But for me and medication have never really got on, so I would prefer to do it naturally. So when I was 16, I got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, severe anxiety, and mild depression. Wow. And I was having cognitive behavioural therapy. So I think it was like 6 weeks worth of that. It's like the standard course that I had at the time. But the issue was the waiting list was so long that I actually didn't get seen until months after the incident had happened. So those kind of like 6 months to a year that I was waiting, I didn't know what to do. I hadn't confided in my family with exactly what happened because I didn't even know really what happened. And it wasn't until a year later that I spoke to my mum, and I pulled my mum aside and I said, Mum, listen, like, I think this is what's happened to me. She was the one that confirmed it and was like, this is what this is called. I hadn't put the two things together. So it was really, sometimes you don't even realize yourself what you're going through. It takes an outsider to actually kind of say, this is abuse, this is what this is.
Yeah. So you went on to your second relationship?
Yes. So my first one was kind of like when I just turned 16, I was still in school. And then my second one was like a couple months before I turned 17. And this person, they weren't local, which turned out to be a blessing in the end. But they also had very poor mental health and had been through a lot in their life, and it just wasn't a healthy relationship. So long story short, this was more emotional abuse. They would go out and cheat on me all the time. And then they would come back and say that if I just did this or if I just did that, then they wouldn't need to go and seek it with other women. They were very overprotective if other guys came near me. So, you know, it was more that controlling kind of emotional behavior, what I could wear, what I couldn't wear, things like that. So I'm not going to go into too much detail with you guys, just in case any of you have been through this, don't want to trigger any of you. But my second relationship was very much kind of emotionally and more controlling.
Do you think a lot of attracting this individual came from not being totally healed from your first relationship?
Yes, because this person people were scared of. They'd walk down the street and they'd see him and they'd know that he wasn't one to mess with because he could fight. And I felt like if I was with him, nobody could hurt me because he would protect me, when actually I needed to protect myself from him. So I was looking for the wrong person, because I was like, okay, this person hurt me. I need to be with someone who's going to stop anyone else hurting me again. But then they hurt me. So yeah, it definitely it was not a healthy relationship.
So your mental health then, because again, more trauma.
Yeah, well, this was almost worse because I would rely on them to make me feel better. So I would have up to 4 panic attacks a day at this point, and they would make me feel like they were the only person that could make my anxiety better. They were the only person that could make me feel better. And then when I finally left them, they basically told me that nobody would ever want to go near me because I was broken and I was toxic and I was all these things. So again, they very much put it back on me.
So going back to the first relationship, how did that end? Sorry, did we cover that? Did I miss that?
Yeah, so basically after that day, my mum picked me up from their house. We went home. And again, I'm not going to go into detail, but she noticed something physically and she was like, you're not seeing that person again. And because she refused to take me there, I couldn't get there. So I basically was like, actually, yeah, you know what, no, I shouldn't see this person again. And I told them, and they didn't take it well. They were quite verbally abusive to me, and then their friend actually then threatened me over the phone. So that was the end of that relationship. But I didn't go back, because again, I was very lucky that I was so young that I had parents that could physically stop me seeing these people. Yeah,
the support network was there.
Yeah, my second relationship ended very differently. So we'd come back from a party, and he'd never, by the way, he'd never put his hands on me, like nothing like that. It was all very emotional. And we'd come back from a party where someone had asked for my details, and basically, long story short, we had an argument and he raised his fist. He didn't hit me, but he raised his fist. And his mum heard the commotion, and she basically took me out of the room, locked me in another room away from him, and called my mum to come and get me. So in that circumstance, both my mum and his mum physically, they stopped it happening, and I'm really grateful that they did, because I always call it like a velvet tongue. Like, he could make me think anything. Like, he was so smooth with how he talked, and I just hung off his every word. So I would have probably continued in that relationship if it hadn't have been both my mum, and it was the fact that his mum as well was saying to me, like, I love you, but you can't do this. You need to step away, because this is now getting dangerous for you. Because toxic relationships, abusive relationships, they don't start often with people going in violence straight away. It starts with the little things, the little warning flags, the emotional stuff, and it builds up to that. So I'm really, really grateful that they stopped it before it got to that.
Yeah, so you've come out of this relationship now, and obviously you relied on him to help with your panic attacks and make you feel better about yourself. So how was you managing your mental health after that relationship?
I was totally broken. My parents very much had to pick up the pieces. They had to deal with how bad my anxiety was. I had some backlash from my family because they didn't really understand anxiety, and they thought I was just acting out because I was very angry. I was angry all the time because I didn't understand why this was happening to me. You know, it's not something you get taught about in school. I mean, you may do now, I don't know, but like healthy relationships, you don't really get educated on it. So, you know, these being my first 2 relationships, I had nothing else really to compare it with. So yeah, I was feeling mentally broken, I was feeling angry, I was feeling hurt, I felt very traumatized. And yeah, it was just really difficult. But I did realize at that point that I didn't want to be with somebody that was violent or aggressive in any way. I wanted someone that had a very different temperament.
Yeah. Did you seek any help for your mental health and things like
So yes, so after the breakup was actually when I started getting counselling. So I had cognitive behavioural therapy, but at the time they actually ignored my PTSD and just focused on my anxiety. Because how they saw it was, at the time I was having 4 panic attacks a day. I was having to hyperventilate into paper bags. My mental health was so poor that they were like, we need to sort your anxiety out so that you can sleep, because I wasn't sleeping. I was waking up having panic attacks. So they didn't deal with my PTSD at that time, just my anxiety. So although that helped, at this point, I then left school. I dropped out of sixth form twice because I couldn't even deal with being in the classroom. My anxiety was that bad. And I was just lost. I was like, what can I do if I can't even get my qualifications?
Wow. So on to your 3rd relationship.
Yeah, my 3rd and final toxic one, thankfully. So this was my longest. I was with them for nearly 3 years. This was a very different kind of toxic relationship. They weren't a bad person, but they were very broken, and 2 broken people together doesn't work. It was very emotional based, and it was very not based, like, we didn't trust each other. So it was things like they'd always want to look on my phone. If I was out with my friends, they'd want me to take pictures to prove that I was with my friends, like things like that. So, you know, if any of you are watching this and you're in a relationship where you think, oh, well, you know, I'm not being hit, they're not taking my money, they're not doing all these things, are they making you feel like you need to do things that you don't want to do? Would you normally send a picture to prove that you're with your friends? Would you normally let them access your phone? Would you normally stay in instead of going out because, you know, if you go out, it's going to make them upset? Just think about these little warning triggers, because they're quite regularly the early signs of a toxic relationship. And they were the triggers that I actually ignored, because this was normal for me. I had this in my 2 previous relationships. So, you know, for me, it was like, this guy, he's not physically hurting me, he's not cheating on me, so actually he's a great boyfriend, even though actually he was doing all these things that aren't healthy in a relationship. And he would do things to like purposely hurt me emotionally. Like, he would just suddenly walk out and disappear and not tell me where he went for hours, and for hours I'd be trying to call him and I'd worry where he was. On 2 occasions had to report him missing, things like that. So it was, again, it was more emotional, but I just think it was that we were both very broken people in bad places at that time. It was actually worse after we broke up. So it was after we broke up that things got really bad with this person.
What just to backtrack a little, what was the gap between your second relationship and your third in years?
So it wasn't even a year. So
Wow.
I just turned 17 when I ended my second relationship, and because I remember it was New Year's Day, so I hadn't even turned 17, because I would have turned 17 on the 19th of January. So broke up just before I turned 17, and then it was March time that I got with this person. So February, so literally 2-3 months.
Yeah, no, it adds up when you put it together. It kind of makes sense when you say you were broken, because
Yeah, I
still
hadn't taken that
healing
time.
even from the first relationship, never mind the second. You still had that inner work to do to get to
Yeah,
that.
100%.
So when did it come to the point where you thought you had to end the third relationship?
So 6 months before we broke up, I was trying to say, like, you know, this needs to change, we need to work on this, and they just weren't willing to change. And I got to the stage where I was like, I didn't want to physically be near them anymore. I would go out and see absolutely anybody before I had to spend time with them. They were actually living with me at the time, so it was just little things. And I tried breaking up with them several times in person. They wouldn't let me. So they went back to visit their mum at one point, and I actually texted them and said, listen, I'm not doing this anymore.
And you just
so that's physically not be there for me to be able to end it, because they wouldn't let me end it in person. And because they were at my family's house, I couldn't leave.
So talk to me. You said it got worse after the relationship.
Yeah. So I was harassed for nearly 2 years. I had over 300 emails. They were calling my friends, they were calling my family, they were calling me. And they were just breathing down the phone on no caller ID. So although I just to be clear, I was never worried this person would physically hurt me. I knew that they would never have done that because of their history. So I knew that they would never physically hurt me. But it was like, how do I get rid of this person? And actually, it's because of them that I took 2 years before I started dating again, because in my head, I was like, I can't bring anybody else into dealing with this. Like, they're threatening to turn up outside my house. They're contacting me constantly. It was just an absolute nightmare. So I actually, at this point, I decided to go to the police. So I did. And they got arrested for harassment. And they got given a PIN notice, which basically means that, like, they can't contact you for a specific amount of time. I can't remember if it's 3 months or 6 months. They breached it 3 times. They got arrested both times, and then in the end I just got to the stage where I was like, I'm not going to keep reporting it because they keep getting arrested and just giving more notices. So eventually, after 3 years, they left me alone.
Wow, that's the journey, isn't it? After you've ended the relationship, you still have to deal with that person and still deal with again, mental abuse, wasn't it? Because you was getting in your head by calling you and breathing down the phone and still being a part of your life, which you didn't want anymore, and you knew it was toxic and something you wanted to end. So
yeah, and they were kind of living a double life, because their friends all thought they were perfectly okay because we had mutual friends. They were in new relationships, so you know, to the people that didn't know what was going on, which wasn't many people, because I didn't go around telling people about it, they were perfectly fine. But then I was getting emails saying they were going to kill themselves if I didn't meet up with them. So, you know, very, very, very different sides. But I guess, you know, that's how bad mental health can get.
Yeah, 100%. So talk about starting again and dating and new relationship and how that's been for you.
I was very lucky at this point, because yes, it was hard to begin with. I'd always had somebody else to lean on, even though they weren't the right people to lean on. I always had somebody else in my life. And now I was like, actually, I just want to be by myself. I don't know if I can physically open myself up to other people again. So I I focused very much on my friends. I did an online uni degree. I got myself a different job away from my ex-partner. And I just focused on rebuilding my life again. I went back to therapy and had more counselling. I finally got the help I needed for my post-traumatic stress disorder, which really helped. And I realised that I'd actually held in all of that trauma because I didn't want to put how I was feeling on other people by sharing it. So it was something that I kept to myself for a very long time, partly out of shame. Like, people saw me as so strong, so how could someone else see me as strong? But actually, like, I was basically in effect letting people walk all over me. And also because I didn't want my parents to be like, why didn't I protect her? Because I knew that's how they would feel. They would think, wow, how did I not know the extent of this relationship? So I stayed by myself. I worked on myself. I did a lot of personal development. Like I said, went back to therapy, and it was a long time before I started dating again. Like I said, it was like 2 years.
That's really good though, you took that time, and I think that's important when you're going into another relationship, because we always talk about baggage and carrying baggage from one relationship to the next and not unpacking that and dealing with it. And the more you do that, the more toxic these relationships can become, because you've not healed, you've not got over. It's almost like grief, isn't it? Getting over something, a loss.
100%. You kind of grieve yourself.
Yeah. So without doing that work, then you're just bringing that pain into the next relationship. So took the learnings from what you went through, Becca, what have you learned from what you've gone through?
I've learned that when you step into a relationship, or when you're thinking about going into a relationship, you need to know what you want from that, and you need to know what you're not willing to accept from that. So when I started dating again, I knew I wasn't willing to have anyone tell me what I could and couldn't do. They were my decisions and my decisions alone. I wanted somebody that was trustworthy and honest. I wasn't gonna condone anyone cheating on me, or like engaging with other girls in a romantic setting, things like that. And I knew that I wanted someone that had very similar moral and values to me. I didn't want a party animal that was going out every weekend. I wanted someone that wanted to build their life, and a life that we could build separately, but also together. I needed someone that was independent and wanted to focus on their own life so that I could focus on mine, but equally we could also do that together. They always say 2 broken people don't make a whole, 2 whole people make a whole.
100%, definitely. Yeah, so some major learnings from what you've gone.
100%.
So in your new relationship?
Yeah. So it took me, I say that I found him, I didn't, he found me, but it took me a long time. So I started dating again, and I was finding that actually I was cutting people off really quickly. As soon as I had a few warning signs, I was like, no, that's not happening again. End that. Yeah, and it was actually when I was 22, I had just started my own coaching business, and I was doing really good in myself. My anxiety was better, my PTSD was manageable, and I was in the best shape of my life. I was feeling good, and I was finally surrounded by really positive people. I had incredible friends, and I was in a really good place in my life. And this person that had approached me like a year before, we actually met on Tinder. So for any of you that completely write off Tinder, don't completely write it off. It can happen, okay? It can happen. But we kind of started talking the year before. He added me on Snapchat, and then we'd kind of just stopped talking. Things had fizzled out. So like we never actually started dating at that point. And then a year later, I went out in Birmingham for my 22nd birthday, and I just get this message on Snapchat from him with like the love heart emojis, romantic, right, guys? So he was like, so why have you been ghosting me then? And I was very straight with him. I said, you haven't been making an effort with me, you haven't been speaking to me, so I deleted you. And he said to me, what's a guy like me got to do to get a girl like you? And I was so fed up with all the cheesy lines. I went, just talk to me. And he did. He just talked to me. He didn't try anything. He was happy to take things at my pace. And we ended up having a 4-hour-long phone conversation, which is just crazy because I wasn't as busy then as I am now, but I was still very busy. So I didn't really have that time. And the fact that he could actually kind of pin me down to a conversation for 4 hours and I was completely engaged was just incredible for me. And there was something straight away, the first time I met him, there's just this light about him. Like everyone he meets, he can make them feel comfortable, he can make them feel at ease. He's so positive, he's so loving, he's so warm, and he was everything that I didn't even realize I needed in my life. Like it was on such a deeper level. Like I'd always kind of gone for what I thought I wanted or what I maybe found like attractive, and he was completely different to anyone I'd ever been with before. But it was like my soul wanted him, my soul could feel that connection. So it was on a very much deeper level. And the first time he came to my house, he went straight into my mum and introduced himself to her. Didn't even have to like try and drag him in there. Like he just walked in and did it himself. And we went up to my room to talk, and he sat on the end of the bed for the whole time. Didn't try and hug me, didn't try and like hold my hands. Like he let me sit at the top of the bed, he sat at the bottom, and we just talked. And I had so much respect for him because he was giving me that respect. And we took things really slowly, you know. He'd not had the best history, which I won't share because he doesn't share it with people. But he hadn't had the best history in relationships. And we dated for 3 months before we'd even committed to a relationship. But within that time, we really got to know each other, probably more than I'd known any of my previous partners in the entire times that we were together. So we'd go on dates, but things like just going for a walk or just going for like a picnic or like a Starbucks or something like that. They were little things. It wasn't ever like big grand gestures. It was just us being in a comfortable setting, getting to know each other. And he always told me that we'd be together, and I never believed him. 3 years later, here we are, and we just bought a house together. So things can change.
That's amazing, especially from what you've been through. So it's as I was saying off camera, it takes a lot to want to date again and be in another relationship when you've been hurt in your previous relationships, and that was in your early years. So your first impressions of kind of what a relationship was painful, and it brought you a lot of pain and distress. So to now find that and take that leap to want to date and then be in a healthy relationship now takes a lot, definitely.
Yeah, I'm very blessed. I mean, doing all the work that I had to do on myself just to find him, I didn't think he existed. And don't get me wrong, for anybody watching this, it wasn't just smooth sailing. Like I had a lot of anxiety around relationships and trust issues that we had to work through together. But the difference was he was understanding, he listened. If like I would remember I'd wake up in the night having a panic attack, and he'd jolt up and he'd start rubbing my back, or he'd run and get me a glass of water, and he would be with me. He wouldn't make me feel bad for having a panic attack like people had previously. He would be right there with me until I was okay again. And I remember, I think it was last year, I passed out, I fainted, and I never do that. And he stayed up the whole night just watching me to make sure I was okay. And I mean, it's making me feel emotional. If that's not love, then I don't know what is.
It definitely is.
I'm crying because I'm happy. Oh gosh. But yeah, so I'm very blessed to have him. If he's watching this, if he watches this back, he'll laugh because he'll be like, "Oh, she's crying again." But he made me realize that actually having emotions was okay. It's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to be upset and angry, like they're normal emotions. The difference is, how do you communicate that? Do you shout at your partner, which was always used to happen, which was what used to happen to me, or do you sit down and have a conversation and try and understand what's going on? And he's never shouted at me, so he doesn't like confrontation. He never has. And if we get in an argument and he gets angry, he'll be like, I'm just going to go for a walk, I'll come back once I've calmed down, I'm fine. He'll go for a walk, and then he'll come back, he'll sit down, he'll be like, okay, let's talk about this, let's work through it. And our communication's there, and it wasn't easy at the beginning. Like, we had to work through both of our past baggage, but the difference was we loved each other enough to commit to each other and choose to work through all those hard times. And then this last year, we've just been in such an incredible place. You know, COVID's broken a lot of couples, but even though we weren't together for a lot of it, because, and by the way, together, we were in a relationship. I mean, we live separately, so I didn't see him for like months at a time because of lockdown, but we made it work. And actually, we've come out a lot stronger because of it. And obviously now we're moving into our new house, so we face things together, but we've also got very separate lives. So yeah, I'm very, very grateful for him.
No, that's great. You mentioned off camera there's some helplines for people in abusive relationships.
Yeah, so my full-time job that I do now, I actually went into because I wanted to help victims of domestic abuse. So there's obviously, if you're not sure if you may be the victim of domestic abuse or in a toxic relationship, and please, 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 if anything I've mentioned on here you think, oh, I've had that, or they've been a little bit controlling, don't think just because they're not physically hurting you or they're not stealing all of your money that actually you're not necessarily going through that. And it doesn't make you weak, it doesn't make you a victim, it just means that you're in a not good relationship, you're in a toxic relationship that you maybe need to get out of, maybe you don't, you know. But if you're unsure, please, please, please either do one of the following. So you can call the police. They're specifically trained to deal with domestic abuse, and they have specific units that help with it, and they're experts at finding out what crime it is. I'm trying to think of the words. So you can talk to them and they can go, right, this is coercive control, right, this is financial. They can decide that for you, they can ascertain that for you. So please, if you're unsure, just call the police. They're not gonna be frustrated for you calling them, believe me. It's something that's a priority worldwide, and it's something that they're going to want to help you with. There's also this really amazing charity called Refuge, which is a domestic abuse charity. I actually raised money for them earlier on this year, and it's specifically a domestic abuse charity, so you can always contact them. And there's also a national domestic abuse helpline. So if you want to talk to someone that isn't the police or isn't a professional authority in that sense, but rather you'd want to talk to a charity of people that are, again, trained to recognise what types of domestic abuse you may be going through, then please contact the domestic abuse helpline, because again, they can help you. One, if you are a victim of domestic abuse, they can talk you through it, they can help you kind of come to terms with things. Second of all, if you're in a position where you're actually in danger, they can help you leave safely. So yeah, if even if you're unsure, please contact them. If you feel like you've got no way out, please, if it's safe for you to do so, find a way to contact them, because it's not something that you should have to deal with. And this is men and women, by the way. Men are victims of domestic abuse too, just as much as women. So regardless to what gender you identify as, please, 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 if you're concerned about your safety or your well-being, or there's some warning signs and you want some advice, just contact one of the people that I've just advised you to.
And I'll put that all in the description as well, so you can easily have all the information there.
Yeah.
Becca, thank you very much. It's been amazing. Thank you for telling your story and your journey so far. And I'm glad you found some happiness after all that.
Me too.
Yeah, appreciate you, and thanks again for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And people, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.